all until he was, things happened. I'm going to questions, and if you all have any questions, feel free to ask. At the end of it, it turned out that it was wasn't necessarily a hoax call, but there was no gun, right? Somebody thought they heard gunshots, and ends up there was no gun, there was no shooter. However, they handled it as though it were an active shooter situation, and I want you all to pay particular attention to some of the things he talks about going on while he's responding to the call. The first thing I want you to pay particular attention to is he happened to be luckier than most. He was very quick on the scene. So Mr. Fox is a deputy here for Bluefield West. Come on up, Mr. Fox, and share with him. I understand. You gotta they come back this way because they gotta see you on the screen. See yourself right there.
All right.
Beckley can't see you if you can't see you.
I guess that was Tuesday, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes, Tuesday. It was somewhere around just before time for classes started at 11.
Yeah, Tuesday. I mean, it's kind of just like any other day. You're sitting there, eating, doing whatever, hanging out, and it's not like movies or anything where they know an active shooter and then you get to go talk about what you're gonna do and all that. I was actually at the police station when it came out, and came out as a code silver, which I had no idea what it was at first, and then called up to 911. They told us, shots fired at the emergency room up at the hospital. There's an active shooter. They think people have been hit. We get up there. I was the first one there. I mean, it's not like everybody's calm. Everybody's running around. People are running here, saying they see a guy with a gun upstairs. Some people said they heard 3 gunshots. Some people said they heard 1. Some people don't even know what's going on. So I wait. In a situation like that, what we'll do is, if you're first on scene, you go ahead and get your AR loaded up, make a perimeter. You wait on a second officer before you start clearing the buildings. Luckily, one of the K9 units was up at the range training his dog, so he was there about 20 seconds after I was. So then we went up to, I believe it's building C or building I, and we started clearing. Well, people are telling you they don't have a description of the guy. Then you have some person telling you white guy.
Hold on, tell them what clearing is.
Clearing, it's basically it'd be like you start at the door here, and you just talked about slicing the pie. Basically, you're taking your gun out, you're slicing the pie all the way around till you can get to this corner so you can see. You're basically going room to room clearing, making sure nobody has a gun, nobody's hurt. If they are hurt, it sucks, but you can't stop and help them yet. You have to find the shooter and, basically just eliminate the threat as quick as possible. Luckily, nobody been shot or anything. Then as we were in building C, we get reports that there's shots fired in building I. So now we think he's on the move. He's in the whole hospital. At that point, there's about 7 of us there. So we just split up into teams of 2 and 1. And you just go throughout the whole hospital, I mean, it's scary at the same time. You can't tell while you're there. Your adrenaline, it's going crazy. You're not scared until afterwards when you realize, maybe there is somebody shot and we can't find them.
Talk about your experience when you first pulled up in the parking lot and what you saw. When you first pulled up in the hospital parking lot, you saw something. What did you see?
When I first pulled up, you've got security guards, people that work for the hospital. Everybody's running around. There's some trying to get in the building, some trying to get out of the building. You don't know if one of them are the shooter. It's basically like, it'd be like everybody in here taking off through that door while there's 10 others trying to get in here. And at the same time, from what you understand, somebody's been shot. It's basically just chaos, and you try to make sure you're safe above everybody else, your officers are safe, and then you try to go in and do what you can do. Like I said, you don't get nervous. You don't get really nervous till you pull up. And at first, normally, you get a lot of shots fired calls. You think, it's just another one of those. And then when you pull up and you see everybody running around, all right, this might be the real deal then. And it's nerve-wracking, that's for sure.
Tell me about the hospital security staff. When you pulled up, where were they and what were they doing?
They were standing right outside of building C, which is where the original call came out as the shots fired. A couple of them were trying to get inside. a couple of them are so scared they're way back here. Basically, they just ask, what can we do? I mean, without being rude, you basically move. That's the best thing you can tell everybody is move, find a building, lock yourself inside, let us do what we have to do. I mean, for every other person that goes inside the building, that's just another person we have to make sure is, we have to take care of. So if everybody just gets out and lets us get in, it's a whole lot easier on us.
So talk about your experience while you were clearing and you rounded the stairwell and encounter with the lady.
Well, at this point, we moved to the main part of the hospital, which is right off the ER. And it was me, another guy I work with, he's about my age, and then a lieutenant. Well, lieutenant went around the other side. I mean, the other guy we're clearing, walking up the stairway. We cleared the first floor, all the doors are locked, everybody's okay. Somebody got the bright idea not to get in a room, and they wanted to run around the hallways. Well, as I opened the door, I had my AR. She ran right into the muzzle of my AR, and had my finger been on the trigger. She'd probably been shot. Had my finger been on the trigger, and she started screaming, yelling. She thought she saw a shooter. That's why she's running. So, had she stayed in her room, probably wouldn't have had that problem. I mean, she got a little cut on her side from the gun, but I mean, if she'd have stayed where she was supposed to, we wouldn't have had that problem. Basically, that's the main thing. Like, even if there's a shooting up here, the best thing, just lock the door. I know some people think they want to fight and, don't want to be locked in, but that just causes a bigger problem for us responding, really. Because now, I mean, when you go through training and stuff, they'll put you in a hallway like that and have about 20 people in there acting like they're civilians. Well, you can hear shots down the hallway. Well, then you're trying to make sure, everybody's okay. Well, then when the person gets down here, they turn around and start shooting at you. There's a lot of times after shooters act like they're somebody in distress, then you pass them up not thinking about it, and turn around and shoot you. Basically, if you just lock yourself in a door or lock yourself in a room and wait for us to knock and make sure, you're okay, that just makes it a whole lot easier on us.
All right, so how quick do you think your response time was? You told me you responded from the time you got the call and you sorted out that what a Coach Silver was. How long do you think it took you to get on campus?
Probably took me about anywhere from 50 seconds to a minute.
All right, so his response time was a minute or less. And your backup then was probably a minute, 15 minutes, 20 seconds?
Yep.
So according to our statistics, had there been an active shooter, these two gentlemen could have been on scene within the allotted time, which is kind of rare, right? According to our statistics, yes.
Well, it depends. You know how long it took dispatchers to get out?
Well, that's true.
Dispatch, I think the delay on something like a normal call delay is about anywhere from 30 seconds to 45 seconds. On a call like that, where it comes straight through 911, probably about 10 to 15 seconds. So I'd say it probably gone on a little longer.
So from call to end, probably from call to your arrival was probably 2 minutes.
About 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. So they still could have been in the window to be there during most of that, because they said the shooting stopped at 2 minutes, but the average was more like anywhere from 5 to 7, and they were over. Some of them were as short as 2, so just about all of them they could have been there. Beckley, anybody else have any questions?
No. They ever determined what the gunshot sounds were?
No, realistically, what we think happened was, it's West Virginia, a lot of people open carry. Somebody probably open carried into the hospital. Somebody got freaked out and pressed it. Well, then they called somebody in another building and said gun, and that person probably said gunshots, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger till, somebody saying somebody's been shot here, somebody's been shot there. Really, I don't want to call it rumors, but I mean, people get scared and then their story changes from what really happened. And then, either way, we treat it the same either way. Whether it's, somebody's just seen with a gun or somebody's been shooting, it's the same response for us. We have to go through every building.
Is it the hospital building?
No. The only place that's anything like that.
The only federal building you got in Bluefield West
Federal
is the
courthouse.
Social Security office of the federal courthouse.
Or the
Well,
federal-
it's not a post office, is there not
Yeah, I'm
is.
sorry, post
I'm
office
just
too would be
thinking
federal
of the
building.
things that I
It
was
is,
told.
but
Yeah.
the thing
You're
is,
not supposed
we
to
have,
carry.
yeah, you're not supposed to,
You
like in
shouldn't
the,
carry in a hospital, you shouldn't open
No.
carry in a hospital.
And that's what I was thinking.
But it's
Yeah.
still not a federal building.
that's like,
Was it illegal though? Was there a reason for them to call? Was that illegal to open carry?
it's not
No,
illegal to
they
open
don't-
carry.
no.
But the thing with Bluefield Regional, I mean, it's Bluefield, you know, people are scared of everything. I mean, you get a lot of shots fired around here, you know, it's got that reputation. Somebody sees somebody with a gun, well, me, I don't care, it's a gun. I carry guns all the time. Somebody in the hospital that, you know, doesn't like guns, is scared of them, well, that person's got a gun. So now they're calling this person, and it just gets around.
Like the game that kids play.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but it's also, that's one of the things that we talked about when I was giving you all of this stuff, when we talked about how are we going to respond as a police force. Remember, one of the things that I told you was the difficulty of getting accurate information. Now that difficulty is not only on the research side, but it's also what happens. This is not atypical. In other words, this is not strange. This is typical of what happens with an active shooter situation. We got a call that this happened, but it was really this, but it could have been that, and somebody thought it was this other thing. When you get to the scene, it's not clear. You don't have a clear-cut scenario, you don't have clear-cut information. It's not as cut and dried as what it is after you gather all the facts after the event is over. Does that make sense? What happened to him is, in that is very typical right from the start. From the start, dispatch says Code Silver, Bluefield Regional, Code Silver, and he's sitting there thinking, the heck's a Code Silver, right? And so he finally gets that clarified, and he's on the way. Well, when you get there, the first people he bumps into are the security staff for the hospital. They're not sure if there's a man with a gun, or if there's and it's just an open carry, or there's somebody walking in with a gun, or it's an active shooter, and they're not even sure which building he's in. Well, he might be an I, he may be an A, he may be in an actual hospital part. We don't know. So the difficulty that he run into is very typical of what you see as a police officer responding to an active shooter type situation. It's very fluid, and you get a ton of misinformation. Now, do any of these people intend to deceive you? Absolutely not. But all of them only have one little piece of the puzzle, right? They may only know one snippet of information, or they may not know anything, and they're just repeating somebody else told them, and it's hysteria. Because one of the things he said is very true. The general public tends to freak out, and they panic, especially in a crowded place like a hospital or something like that, Mercer Mall or wherever. They tend to freak out a little bit, and so you get mass movement of people. And then in the chaos and the confusion, there is no accurate data to pull out, right? So what he ran into is very typical of a situation that any of you might run into in an active shooter situation. It's all very fluid. It's all very difficult to cipher out. And his expectation is, of course, what you told me. What did the department? What is your all's department's policy about going in on an active shooter? You told me you had to wait for what?
You have to wait for backup, can't go alone.
Right. So their policy on an active shooter is, we're going to go, but you got to have backup. You got to have somebody to go with you, which I think is probably the best policy, right? I think there needs to be an officer and his cover man to go in on an active shooter situation. I think that gives the two officers the best opportunity to overtake any active shooter. And so, he's got the policy, he knows what to do, he follows policy, their response time is good, and they treat it very much like a real situation. Thank God it turned out to be nothing. However, it brings to light a lot of the things, and that's why I wanted him to come here and talk to you about. It brings to light a lot of the things that we were talking about in theory. Their response time was exceptional. I don't know of a lot of police departments who can match that response time, and let's be honest, and if he'll be honest with you, part of it was luck.
Yeah, if I'd have been on John Nash, we'd been 5-6 minutes out at
Right.
least.
So if he's not where he happens to be at the time the call comes in, if he's on the other side of town, his response time goes from 1 minute and 30 seconds from the time he gets the call, with 2 minutes and 30 seconds total, to 5.5 to 6 minutes, which almost puts him outside the window, right? So part of it was luck, part of it's good policing, part of it's we're in the city and we're kind of close together. But the real part of that thing is that the dispatcher gives them the piece of information they got, and they don't have accurate information. When you get there, it's chaos. everything is fluid, everything is changing. That's the part that I wanted to bring to you, is that, he did an excellent job in very, very, very bad circumstances. Turns out nobody was active shooter, nobody got hurt, except the lady who ran into his gun barrel. But it brings to need some more information that we need to, that we'll talk about. Questions for him before he goes?
Trying to find out who it was.
No idea. Like I said,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, but you good, go ahead.
Do you guys just have to chalk that up to good training, or is there a way to go back and find who made this phone call and caused all of this?
It was done by a switchboard, which is like, that'd be like up in the security building here. I think there's a switchboard here, and where it sends out a text message.
Yeah.
All right, that's how it worked up there. Somebody at switchboard was probably told, "Hey, gun, hit the button." Hunter the messages go out to everybody in different buildings. Well, now
So no single person is at fault for all
No.
of this confusion, man.
No, like I said, I mean, could you probably pinpoint it to it? Yeah, but you don't. I mean, it's better to be safe than sorry, realistically.
Yeah.
It's better because if we keep doing that and we get somebody fired based off, well, you said this instead of that,
Yeah.
then the next time there is somebody up there with a gun and they could, let us know first. Like I said,
And you said somebody ran into your barrel, I'm assuming, would you grab AR or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, anytime, if we get shots fired, or if we have we had an armed robbery on College Avenue, we're not our pistol's a defense weapon. Pistol's the last resort. My first thing is shotgun or AR.
He brings out something positive that we need to know from a standpoint, and it even goes back to the police officer shooting they had in Crmj. Know it from a police officer standpoint, and he's giving you very accurate information. A handgun is a defensive weapon. A shotgun and a rifle are offensive weapons. They are made to be offensive. If you enter into a situation of an active shooter and he has an offensive weapon and you have a defensive weapon, 90% of the time, who wins? The offensive weapon, right? So that's why they carry the ARs. That's why they have those offensive weapons. And when he gets out, first thing he does is make that AR live, and he's ready to go. So now he can meet offensive weapon firepower with offensive weapon firepower, right?
If you ever see, if somebody up here had a gun, and it was the same scenario, hopefully nothing ever happens, you're going to see probably 7 or 8 of us, all of us have it, either an AR, a shotgun, you're going to see the dogs out. It's, even though we don't know, we'll take it as serious as possible, so.
You carry both shotgun and an AR?
I carry a shotgun and an AR in the trunk. And
Is that your choice?
no, it's policy.
Man.
You better have, policy is one or the other, and ever since the bank happened, you better have both.
Oh, so wow,
So,
okay.
and we carry the 223. We have the 2 30-round PMAGs stacked together.
Yeah.
Ever since all that happened, it's a whole lot of stuff has changed policy-wise.
Any other questions before I turn him loose and we jump back into some of our notes and things? I just wanted I thought it's terrible timing, but it was very relevant to what we were doing, so I wanted to bring him in and let him talk about his experience. Beckley, any questions?
No.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fox. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you. So, the other thing that brings to light 2 or 3 other situations, and he's got some things he wanted to do, so I wanted to let him go. But it brings to light some other things that I wanted to tell you all about. And that is training. It became very obvious to me that there had been absolutely no active shooter drills performed at the hospital and no active shooter drills performed between Bluefield PD and the hospital. Why was that? Because when the call first comes in, he's like, what's code silver, right? So that tells me that there's been some coordination there, but there's been no drills. Because that should have been code silver. If you're going to use that as your code for an active shooter to hospital, you should be on point with that. Everybody should know it. It should be common terminology, right? It should be discussed. The other thing was hospital staff should absolutely know what to do You don't expect the clients of the hospital necessarily to know what to do. But you should expect what your hospital staff to grab all of those people and say, look, we're on a lockdown situation, come in here, and close the door, right? So you may have some people roaming around the halls, but your hospital staff shouldn't be the people roaming around the halls. Finally, my last thought on that was you've got the security staff, and I didn't neglect to ask whether they're armed or unarmed, so I don't know, but security staff was out front, and they haven't gathered a whole lot of intel to help. Security staff should be helping secure perimeters. They should be helping gather information. They should have that intel ready for the police when they get there, as much intel as they can. And they were out front going, well, we really don't know what's going on. So, I mean, it's this interesting situation. Now, I want to talk to you about how we're going to, or what has been suggested that we use to help deal with this problem. There were several recommendations that came out of all this, and I'm going to pull it up here on the computer and we'll go over it. Give me just a second. This come out of some of the school shootings. Some of this come out of primarily the Virginia Tech school shooting, okay? But these were some of their key findings. Key findings from these school shootings. Critical information sharing faces substantial obstacles. There are silos. There is no open communication between education, healthcare, and law enforcement. That says a lot. There is no open communication between your educators, your education providers, your mental health providers and medical health providers, and law enforcement. And there should be a partnership in that. They say there's silos, there isn't any. There is no accurate and complete information on individuals prohibited from possessing a firearm, and there should be. It says state laws and practices do not uniformly ensure that persons restricted from possessing a firearm are known.
No database.
There's no database for people who are prohibited from possessing a firearm. That means that if you have a domestic violence conviction, if you have a protective order, if you have a felony conviction, if you have been adjudicated mentally incompetent, all of those circumstances prohibit you from possessing a firearm. There is no list that we could go to if we wanted to know. You know, I saw old Joe Smith with a gun just a few minutes ago. I wonder if he's on that list. There is no list that we can go to and say, yep, right there he is. He's on that. You cannot have a gun list.
I thought the police could look in the database and see that he was a felon. And
Well,
You can, but there's
see
other
that,
circumstances.
yeah.
What if Joe Bass is not a felon? What if he's been adjudicated mentally unstable and he just got out of, where's y'all's mental hospital? In Virginia, it's Marion for the criminally insane. Where would be your all's?
I don't know.
Is it, help me, Beckley, is there one up there?
He said Huntington.
Huntington? Maybe, there's gotta be one closer than Huntington, but anyway. So there's no list for him. There's no list for that guy.
Okay.
There's no list for a guy who has a protective order. His wife is afraid of him and she got a protective order against him. There is no list. He hadn't committed a crime. He's just got a protective order against him. Or he's committed some misdemeanors and he has a protective order against him. There is no list.
Does that protective order prevent him from carrying a gun
Yes.
if he's nowhere near his wife?
Yes.
He can't carry a gun, period.
Not allowed to have one in his possession, in his home, anything.
Right.
And I guess there would probably eventually be a way to look it up, but you would have to, first of all, criminal justice agency would have to do it. And they would have to have probable cause to do it.
Right.
You can run, you know, like a criminal history with firearms indicator. It'll tell you if there's any mental health history.
Right.
And all that stuff.
But what you have to have is you have to have that justification to run that, for one. And two, they're talking about doing something here with this key finding. They're talking about creating a list that would give criminal justice professionals the opportunity to check quickly and not go through so many steps and not have so many requirements, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't want John Q. Public to be able to access that list and say, you know what? Old Rasnick ain't supposed to have a gun. What's he doing hunting or whatever? I think that's.
Why would you not want public access?
Because I think, again, you begin to involve people who are working off ulterior motives.
What about the public accessing a sex offender registry?
I think there are good and bad points to that too. My issue is if you see somebody that you suspect, as John Q. Public, it's your job to report. If you see somebody that you suspect should not be handling a firearm, report it to law enforcement, let them handle it. That's kind of my take. Don't actively seek it out and try to solve the problem yourself.
Well, right, but I mean, I'm looking at the standpoint is, you know, there's, let's say in Giles, because I know Giles, you know, we have like 40 police officers. You got like 15,000 citizens. So if you have 15,000 people that can look at the same list that law enforcement officers can, they give you much more of an accurate report. Say, hey, you know, I noticed that James Lee has a weapon, but this list says he's not supposed to have a weapon.
And I don't argue with your logic. My issue with it is that it's just like the sex offender registry. I think that there's part of that the public has a right to know, and I'm glad that the public does know. The other part of it is that list gets abused. That list gets misused. It gets abused. There are things that happen to people on that list that are borderline criminal from citizens that shouldn't happen because of that list. And my fear is if you have this list, instead of relying on police, you're going to try to take matters into your own hands. You're going to try to do some vigilante. Well, I've got a gun. I'll just put the skids to that. You're not supposed to have a gun. You don't want to confront somebody like that. You want to let your trained professionals do it. And does that mean that we're going to have to wade through? I don't think you'll get as many calls as what you think. Does that mean you'd have to wade through a few extra calls of, hey, I'm not sure that guy's supposed to be having a gun? Maybe. You have to go through a few, but I don't think you're going to get the volume of calls that you might think that you would get. I mean, you get a few, but I don't think you get tons. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if I were going to balance that, I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong by any stretch of the imagination. I would balance it more on the conservative side, just simply because I know how sometimes public access to people who are not invested in law enforcement can misuse that information.
What if it was generic? Like, the only thing it said was, you identify the individual and whether they could have a gun or not. That had nothing to do with why. It doesn't say if they're a felon, doesn't say if they have mental issues, doesn't say if they're a protected order, it just says so-and-so cannot have weapons. That's it.
As long as the list was accurate, as long as we applied to fidelity and accuracy, I still wouldn't have a huge problem with that. I still, me personally, I still would like to see it go through law enforcement. I think we're tending to go, as a society, we're tending to go back to vigilantism, to that, West Virginia, open carry, protect yourself, open carry, do what you got. It's going to lead down a road of vigilantism leads down a road of corruption, right? Because people will abuse this newfound authority. That's why we went away from vigilantism in the late 1800s, because you had people who would ride down somebody that they thought was a bank robber or a horse thief or whatever, and they'd hang them right out there where they caught them and not bring them back to the court system. And so you got into corruption. Then there would be people who would just hang somebody they didn't particularly like, and under the guise of he was a horse thief, he stole my horse, and they, you know, they got rid of this person, and this vigilantism just kind of got corrupted into the point where it wasn't effective anymore. And so that's why they, for the, you know, all of that bent back into let the police handle it. And so I guess my fear is that as we go down that slope, vigilantism is not an answer to our law enforcement problems. The answer to our law enforcement problems is that as bad as it hurts, and I don't want to pay taxes either, I don't like to pay extra taxes either, but as bad as it hurts, we need to all come together and fix our tax system and find out a way to put enough police officers in Giles County and Tazewell County and Mercer County and Monroe County and McDowell County to service the public there, right? We are a public service agency in law enforcement, and we need to have the staff to be able to step in and service that public and protect that public, instead of having to work short staff. That's my answer to it versus the vigilante side of things.
That's the way.
That doesn't make me right. I'm not discounting you at all. That's kind of the way I think about things. I think we need to go back to the police model and put enough police officers on the street so that we can do our job and be effective.
That's the only thing that puts me on the fence about that, is I agree, you know, it would be very helpful if we as civilians now could look at it but is there enough resources in law enforcement wise to cover every one of those calls? I'm thinking they may get a lot of calls, you know, and would there be enough resources to cover that call versus something else?
You wouldn't get as many calls as you think.
And that may be true too,
Is
but
half the calls you respond to, is it just an angry girlfriend who knows that her boyfriend is on
That's what
that
I'm
list and
thinking.
now she's calling just to get him in
Well,
trouble?
but you're gonna find in a domestic situation, you do that a lot anyway.
yeah.
You're gonna, when you get into domestic situations, most of it is, and I don't wanna paint that picture, I need to change my words. Sometimes what you run into is two people who are fighting, who are angry at each other, and they're trying to use the police as their get even, right? Well, I've got a protective order, and you'll have, we did a thing on the Virginia side, and you know very well, some counties enforced it, some counties didn't, and in Tazewell, we started enforcing it, and we found it drove our protection orders numbers down. If you get a protective order, that protective order is good for how many years, a permanent one? Somebody help me? 2 years. A temporary protective order is good for X number of days. I think some of them are 15 days, some of them are 30 days. But what that temporary protection order does is it gets you into court. Well, the woman gets a temporary protection order, then she gets into court and she gets a permanent protection order. Well, in about 5 or 6 months after that, him and her patch things up, they get everything straightened out, and he moves back in. Guess what? That protection order is there for 2 years. You can't rescind it, you can't make it go away, you can't do nothing. 2 years. So what did the police in Tazewell start doing? When they found out he'd violated the protection order, snap, snap, charge.
I mean, you can make it go away, but there's a process.
Right. Well, and most of the judges in Tazewell won't.
Really?
You come into them and say, me and him's patched it up, we want to make it go away, and they say, If it was serious enough that you had to come in here and get it, you're not making it go away.
We get them all the time.
Yeah, no, the judges in Tazewell won't play that game. If it's serious enough that you needed a 2-year protection order, it's a 2-year protection order. We're not
Really,
rescinding
that's a
it.
good thing. Isn't most.
What happens in that situation with those, once the word got out in Tazewell, you had a situation where these women were playing this little game when they got mad to use the police to kind of get even with boyfriend or hubby, and sometimes the husbands would do that back to the girlfriends, get the protective orders back and forth. But what they realized is now they've got these permanent, and they're 2-year, and they're not letting them go away. We've seen the request for those go down, and we typically find that they're only very serious cases when those requests are made. If that makes sense.
So the protective order is only one-sided, meaning that she's not gonna face any penalty, she hasn't broken a crime by letting.
It can be two-sided if you get one against her. If she gets one against you and you get one against her, then she would have a problem. But no, as long as she is the person who went and asked for the protective order, then it's all on you, because she is afraid of you.
So we dealt with that a lot. Let's say male got protective order on female.
Right.
Male could contact female all he wants to, but a female responds even once.
She's done it.
She's broken that.
Yep. And so what typically, what typically was happening is that in a period of time, even though these spats were bad, after a period of time, they were making up and getting over it and moving on with their life. But once the police found out about it in Tazewell, they were charging him and arresting him.
It seems like it would be sensible to make the protective order, if you get it against somebody, it means you can't contact them either. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, common sense should tell you that. However, this was brought about for the protection of, these protection orders were a result of the Nicole Brown Simpson and O.J. Simpson event, in which case, the state failed to protect Nicole Brown from O.J., who was obviously the aggressor. And these things are designed to protect you from the aggressor, to protect the weaker from the aggressor.
I mean, do you see any problems if you were to do that? Make that the new way that we give these things out, is you can't contact each other, period.
Well, but yeah.
There's problems with that?
Yeah, because if the other person's not the aggressor, you're punishing the other person. You're putting restrictions on the other person, and they were the victim. No judge of any competent jurisdiction is going to put restrictions on a victim. You know what I'm saying?
Either whether it's.
Because it makes them look like a heel.
I think that could be argued.
Yeah, again, that's the mindset that they operate on. Now, there are judges, I have seen judges in domestic relations court who issues an order. The two of you are not to have any contact with each other, period. Now, I have seen that, but that's a different document than a protective order. Remember, protective order is for a physically aggressive person, not necessarily the verbal communication part of things. What they're trying to protect is a physically aggressive person coming after you, right? And so, a lot of times when you have a lot of yeah back and forth, the judges will come in and issue, tell them both. I'm issuing an order here in this court that you all are to have no contact with each other. And he'll say for 6 months or for 12 months or for 90 days or whatever.
Okay.
And give them that cooling off period.
So there is a way to do that? It's just.
Absolutely. It's just the protective order is not the tool to do it.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Protective order is not necessarily that tool, but there is a tool to do it.
Let me ask you this.
All right.
So I know it's possible for, person A to get a protective order on person B and person B to turn right around and get one on person A.
Right.
But does there have to be a physical issue, or can it be something as much as harassment? Let's say, person A got one on person B. The person B says person A is still harassing them. Can they get an order just because of harassment? Or does it have to be
There's some very strict limitations on an emergency protective order, and they are designed, in theory, to protect from violence, not necessarily harassment, not necessarily aggravating phone calls, or not even in stalking. Only if the person begins to express some violent ideation, right? So that's primarily for violence. However, there are other tools in the judge's toolbox to deal with harassment, not necessarily EPO. There is other tools in his toolbox to deal with telephone harassment, verbal harassment, verbal confrontations. He has other tools in his toolbox to do that. I'm just not sure that EPO is his best tool. Now, where the judge has to decide in these things is he has to decide what's the propensity for violence, right? Is this just two people talking crap back and forth to each other, or is there a propensity for this thing to escalate into violence? Now, since the O.J. Simpson deal and since some of these others, our judges don't give a lot of leeway. They do not have a lot of leeway when you're dealing with can something escalate into violence, right? Maybe they should give them a little longer leash. I don't know. It's working pretty good now. They keep especially males on a pretty short leash when it comes to these EPOs, and issue them for just about any justification. But they don't always issue them because there is other avenues for for harassment types of situations and stalking types of situations. In Virginia, one of the first things that happens in a stalking type situation is the prosecuting attorney mails a cease and desist letter.
What?
A cease and desist letter means stop it. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what it means.
Yeah.
They mail the stalker a letter that says, "We have evidence here that you are stalking this subject. You know, the evidence we have says that you've done this, 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 and this over a period of this many days. This behavior is a criminal act. If you continue in this behavior, if you do not leave this person alone, if you continue to contact, if you continue these types of behaviors, we will find you. We will charge you with charge blah blah blah. Please know that this letter is your opportunity to cease and desist all of your activities and stop having contact with said person." And then they send it to them via registered mail, so they have to sign for it. And when the person signs for it, they keep the return receipt. And if that complainant comes back in and says, you know, they're still doing it, which most of the time they quit, but occasionally you get a real nut who will continue doing it, then they will charge that person under the Virginia stalking laws. And so, you know, there's other tools in the toolbox. Does that make sense? Have I answered your question?
It does. I guess the only question, Kitty, about that is mail, or is that more like a civil paper they have to serve?
They typically mail it certified, they don't serve it. Because it's really just a notification of, hey, we know what you're doing, stop it. Because you still have to meet, if you charge this person, you still have to go back and meet all of the evidentiary requirements under the statute of the crime, right? So that letter is not going to be part of that. What you're doing is giving them an opportunity to acknowledging, I know what you're doing is a crime. I don't know if you know what you're doing is a crime or not, but here now you do, right? So that letter that they mail is not necessarily, they bring it into court and say, Your Honor, we sent him a letter. What they do is come in and say, Your Honor, on this date, on this date, on this date, subject did this, this, this. You know.
Their refusal to sign for that letter is irrelevant.
Right. What they're basically doing is trying to, as we talked about in this morning's class, they're trying to avoid the courtroom prosecution for those types of things by giving them the cease and desist letter. The last one of those I ever saw was the stalker was a female and the stalkee was a male. It was a male doctor and a female school teacher. And they went out on a date a couple of times, and she loved him, and apparently he didn't love her. And he went out on a date with some other women, and she would show up at the restaurant he was at and spill drinks on her and cuss her out and ask her, what are you doing here with my boyfriend? And it was bad. And so he came in and got the stalking letter issued. And she quit. To her credit, when she signed for the stalking letter, when she got the stalking letter, she's like, oh, I'm done. And now when she sees him, she turns and walks the other way. They both still live in Tazewell, and he's since married and she's single, but whenever she sees him, she's gone. And I've seen her do it before. I've seen her, she was at a football game on Friday night. You know, everybody in town goes to football games. He's standing at the top of the bleachers, and she's walking up the sidewalk toward him. When she realized it was him, she did an about face and went walking the other way. You know, and I know that because I was privy to seeing the letter that was written and all that kind of stuff, but the general public doesn't know it, right? Nobody knows that happened except the prosecuting attorney, the secretary who typed the letter, and me, because I was kind of in on the process, and there might have been another officer or two who saw that. So nobody else knows why she turns around and walks away, but I'm standing there going, yeah, I know why you turned around. You know, she doesn't want no more trouble. Yes, ma'am.
What's the kind of evidence that they have to have in order to get somebody that letter sent for stalking? Like, does it have to be actual she spilled a drink in the...
Well, what you have to do is you have to show a pattern of harassing behavior that extends over a period of time, and you have to be able to prove it. For example, one of the situations in this case where she was doing all that stuff, in 1 week, she sent him just a couple over 2,000 text messages. Yeah, somebody said nice in Beckley. I hear you.
My brother had a lot of free time on her hands.
Yeah, she had a lot of time to do some stuff, right? So you have to be able to, one thing is she cussed out a girlfriend when I was out to dinner. Another thing is, she sends me an average of 700 texts a week. Another thing is, whatever. But it has to be an ongoing pattern of something that is considered harassment or harassing behavior.
And who did you say sent that letter out, decided yes?
The
it's not?
prosecuting attorney.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brother was having that kind of an issue, exactly, actually, showing up at his house at all hours of the night, stuff like that.
You know, some guys are lucky like that and some aren't. That's
I don't know, I mean, I wouldn't
He
consider that
actually called an
lucky at
attorney
all.
in Princeton, and they told him pretty much the same thing. I mean, it wasn't exactly a cease and desist, but it was a letter from my brother to her saying, okay, enough's enough, it's time to stop her, or I'm going to press charges.
Well, and see, that may be a
Yeah.
step, right.
It's the same thing.
And again, you have to understand that while things are very similar between Virginia and West Virginia, sometimes there's a few little
Right.
tweaks that are a little bit different, but basically the same process in there that happens. The next key finding is accurate and complete information. Oh, never mind, I already did that, I'm sorry, on the firearms list. Okay, that started a big conversation. Improved awareness of communication are key to prevention. It is important that parents, students, teachers recognize the warning signs and report. Improved awareness and communication. Parents, students, teachers should recognize the warning signs and report. You missed a whale of a conversation, Mr. Bremer.
It's for the good time.
No, it's not. We like your input. The next thing that we run into, and we find this both at Columbine and at Virginia Tech, is keeping critical services supplied to those with mental illness. Let me tell you what happens, and it happened at Columbine. Of course, there was a mistake happening at Columbine. What happens a lot of times, and I've dealt with a ton of these folks who have mental issues and they commit crime. I've been around a lot of them, and as you all go into your criminal justice career, you're going to bump into a lot of them. It's a big deal. And let me tell you how this goes. Now, you all are going to look at this and say, well, that defies logic. These people, they should know better. Well, yes, they should, but you have to understand they're dealing with this mental issue, so their thinking is a little skewed. But I'm going to throw this out at you. Had a guy years and years ago, periodically would stop taking his medicine. And when he stopped taking his medicine, he became a monster. He committed all kinds of violent crimes. And when you went to arrest him, he loved to fight. And when you went to arrest him, he could fight. He was about 5'5" and weighed about 145 pounds, and he could fight like Mike Tyson. He was bad. His mental illness made him very strong, right? It made him very stout. And I asked him one time after we'd arrested him and we'd wrestled him all over the place and it'd been terrible. Here's, 3 big deputy sheriffs and one little bitty feller, and he just about whooped all 3 of us to get him arrested and get him in the back of the car. And I asked him after you catch your breath back, you're going, and so you finally get him into the car, and I said, why do you do this periodically? Why do you quit taking your medicine every once in a while? And he says to me, I don't need it anymore. I felt normal. I said, dude, you realize that the reason you were feeling normal is because of the medicine, right? No, I just didn't think I needed it anymore. That is a common theme amongst mental illness people. They will take their medicine for a while. When they start feeling normal again, they say, well, I don't need that. I feel all right. I don't need that medicine anymore. Not understanding that what makes them feel normal is the medicine. And without it, they spiral back out of control. So you run into that a lot. That's why we need interventions to folks who are on probation, who are on parole, who have a criminal history. We need social interventions to step into those folks and double check. Hey, are you still taking your medicine? Are you having any problems? Bring me your pill bottle. All right, you've had this pill bottle for 17 days. You're supposed to take 2 a day. Let me count and see how many's in here. Are you still taking them? Right?
Well, ain't that the doctor's job?
No. No, it is not. It's nobody's job right now. Nobody does it. There is nobody. There should be a mental
Well, they do
health.
with pain medication.
Say that again?
They do with pain medications. Why don't they with psychotic drugs?
The only reason they do it with pain medications is because these doctors don't want to go to the pokey. They're trying to save their own butt. It's not that they care about you. They're scared to death they're going to get locked up. And the reason they don't do it with psychotic medications is because they typically can't be bought and sold. Nobody wants to buy
Lithium.
yeah, like lithium. The one I was thinking about was Thorazine. Nobody wants to buy Thorazine, you know. If y'all ever see anybody on Thorazine, you'll never forget it. I always call it the Thorazine shuffle, because that's all they can do. That's it. That's all they got.
That's great.
Thorazine shuffle right there. So nobody's going to buy that and snort it up their nose because it doesn't give them the desired effect. So therefore, there is no checks and balances. However, Thorazine to somebody who has a mental illness may bring them back into the realm of normalcy and make them able to cope in reality. And they need that drug, and so when they get to feeling normal, they quit taking it. We need mental health counselors to go into communities, to go into homes, to verify with follow-up treatment that these people are taking their meds after they leave the institutions. We don't have that now, but we need it, huh?
Especially those that are violent.
Well, the problem with mental health people is any of them can be violent. All you gotta do is just give them the right situation. Mental health people, all of them can turn violent in a hurry. Yeah, they're so very unpredictable. The next one is train, train, train. Scenario, scenario, scenario. The more we know what to do, the better we are at doing it. So the scenario we talked about when he came in and talked about going to Bluefield Regional, and I told you, one of the things that I can tell you from his story is, one, they don't do any training scenarios at the hospital or at the PD. Two, we really need to focus on doing those training scenarios at the hospital and with the PD. Because the more we train, the better we know what to do and the better we get at doing it. And that may result in saving lives. Federally, the guidelines say that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and Education should develop guidance that clarifies how information can be shared between mental health, higher ed centers and education centers, and police. Yes?
Yeah,
Sure.
please.
The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and Education. That's two U.S. departments of government. The U.S. Department of Health and the U.S. and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Education should develop guidance to clarify how information can be legally shared between schools, mental health professionals, and police. And the U.S. Department of Education, this is number two, the U.S. Department of Education should provide emergency management leadership and training to states. That should also probably come with dollars attached. U.S. Department of Education. To the states on emergency management. Keys to prevention, improved awareness, and communication. Seems so simple. to prevention or improved awareness and communication.
Back to the question.
Okay.
Talking about, it said U.S. Department of Education should provide training on emergency management to states. Is that not like the ICS systems?
They talked about, hold on, let me go back up to it where I was at. They talked about state and local communities receiving training through the programs have clear guidance. What they're talking about on their emergency management is active shooter, tornado, earthquake, hurricane. But then on the other end of that, the other piece they're talking about is something that I have to deal with here at school. It's called FERPA. Y'all ever heard of that? I know you have, but FERPA basically says that your all's information is your all's information, and I can't share it without I ask you, can I share it? Like, if one of you has your mother call up here and say, I want to know what his grades are this semester. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. FERPA will not let me tell you what his grades are, his or her grades are. I apologize. If y'all notice, whenever I let you look at the grade book, I try to take 2 pieces of paper and cover up all the lines except for yours, right? That's FERPA. FERPA applies to public schools as well, and we need to be able to share that information. What they're trying to say with this training is that it's impossible for us to be effective if the school system knows that they've got a student who's getting ready to be in real trouble, and he's exhibiting certain behaviors and certain characteristics, and FERPA prevents them from being able to express that to his counselor, to his therapist, to his psychologist, to the police. You see what I'm saying? And right now, a lot of that stuff prohibits that.
Well, I've got that part, but yeah, I guess I was confused on the, emergency management, because the federal agency has forces of emergency management training.
Right.
I guess it's not like, that there is all reactive, they're not really looking at
Well,
what's happening.
and there needs to be, I'm not sure that FEMA is not necessarily a good person to involve in that. But the other piece that you gotta have in there is you gotta have a U.S. Department of Education, because everything that's implemented in school systems kinda has to go through them. It kinda has to funnel through. And so you're going to have what they like is child-specific and site-specific types of things, right? And so I'm not sure that it wouldn't be a bad partnership. It would probably be a good partnership, but anything that has to do with schools is going to be funneled through school system.
Right. I guess my line of well, I've always been as emergency management
Right, yeah, no.
versus.
And from an incident command setup, you may very well have FEMA on that side of things from the law enforcement side when they come in and do what they do. But on the school system side of things, they're going to operate from a different viewpoint. They've got a different setup they've got to do. And really, basically, all you're trying to do is you educate, you train, and then you target hard. Try to make your target as hard as possible, right? And I think that's kind of where we were at and what we were talking about. All right. Before we review the test, any questions? Maybe if I can scroll back down and find it. Oh, yeah, the keys to prevention. Improved awareness and communication.
Me too.
All right. The study studied how many active shooter incidences? How many? 160. 160 incidences. And it was, the years was from when to when?
2000, 2013.
Out of 160 incidences, on average, how many people were, or how many happened annually? 11.4. In those incidences, how many casualties did we have?
1,043.
Good. All but 2 of these incidences involved multiple shooters. True or false? I'm not hearing y'all sound very confident. What is it?
False.
All but 2 incidences involved multiple shooters. True or false?
True.
False.
Why is it false?
Because there were more than 2 that involved multiple shooters.
There were only 2 that involved multiple shooters. The rest of them involved a single shooter. In 64 incidences, or 40% of the time, the shooter committed suicide, right? At the scene.
Say 60%?
No, 64 incidences, 40% of the time.
True.
Good. During the first 7 years of the study, there were more incidences than the last 7 years of the study. True or false?
False.
Why is that? During the first 7 years of the study, there were more incidences than the last 7 years. What was that? They say false. What is it? What would make that a true statement?
It more than doubled during the second half.
In the last years.
Good.
In the last,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, you
I
go
was
ahead.
just
Tell me.
gonna say, in the last 7 years, it like tripled. It went to 16.4, where the first 7, it was 6.4.
Good. So what we have is we have a situation where our numbers are inclining, right?
Yes.
The average time of the incident is how many minutes?
Usually ends in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, that's right. There were a few of them that ended in how many minutes or less?
2.
2, that's right.
I mean, how many? 23 of 160.
Right. Of the 160 incidences, 108 of them ended before police arrived. True or false?
False.
False. Why is it false?
107.
107.
Those are some nasty.
I'm making these particularly hard because I want y'all to be ready. I don't normally give tests on statistics and numbers, but this one's statistics and numbers and outcomes, and I want y'all to be ready. It's going to be a harder test. I'm not going to lie to you. It is going to be one of the harder tests you've taken. If you all don't study and spend some time with it, you will not pass it. So be aware. 25 shootings, or 15.6 of these incidences, were at more than one location. True or false?
True.
When shootings were at more than one location, there was never any collateral damage. True or false? False. There were an additional 42 people killed and 28 wounded. In at least 65 of the incidents, citizens' engagement ended the shootings. In 21 of these incidences, the situation ended after an unarmed citizen safely and successfully restrained the shooter. True or false?
True.
In 5 incidences, the armed individuals were engaged by law enforcement and an arrest was made.
False.
Why is that false?
Anytime they encountered law enforcement, they ended up dead.
There you go. When law enforcement arrive quickly, many times the shooter will choose to end his own life. In 17 of the incidences, the shooter committed suicide after law enforcement arrived. I was just telling you all that. You don't have to tell me truth. Shooters never carry IEDs.
False.
Shooters rarely wear body armor. False. Remember our shooter in Aurora, Colorado? He went into the movie theater in full body armor, including a helmet. Most of them at least wear a vest. A lot of them at least wear a vest. Klebold and the other fellow wore a vest.
I'm assuming those were your run-of-the-mill small handgun vests and not sappy plate ballistic.
I don't have that data. I can't tell you. I don't have that. All I know is they wore body armor. Now I do know the Aurora shooter, movie theater shooter. His was top of the line. He had
He had a military grade.
Yeah, he had military grade. He had the best you can get. And not only did he have the body armor, but he also had the protection for the groin and the legs, the thighs. He had it all. He looked like a hind catcher. Yeah, he had the full suit. He looked like a hind catcher. I'm telling you. Except he had a glass, one of the glass shields on his helmet that he pulled down. Yeah. What is an open environment for a mass shooting?
Anywhere that there are people walking around,
Good. What's a closed environment?
workplace, something like that, anywhere it's restricted.
Good. Restricted access like a private business, a workplace, someplace where the general public doesn't actually have open access to travel into. How many of the shooters were female? 6 were females. How many of these incidences? I couldn't remember. Okay, I didn't give you that piece of information. I'll ask you this one in a minute because that goes to what we want to do toward the end. Were the majority of shooters in a business employed at that location?
No.
That's correct. No. How many people were killed in a closed shooting? 69. Good. How many were, I didn't tell you how many were wounded, so don't worry about that. Incidents in schools. We had 160 incidents that occurred. How many of those occurred in schools? Higher education, institutions of higher education. How many happened there? 12, good. How about high schools? 27. How about middle schools? Elementary schools? I'm sorry, you're right. 14 in high school. 6 in middle school. How many in elementary school? 4. You're right. 4.
Can you repeat those? Because I have totally different numbers for all of that.
All right. In your schools, there are 27 school incidences that resulted in 57 individuals killed. For the purposes of this, we had school board meetings and school board offices also were part of this study, okay? So your numbers are not going to total up exactly because there was a school board incident and a school board office shooting. So, of the remaining incidences, there are 14 that occurred in high school, 6 that occurred in junior high or middle school. We call it middle school. 4 that occurred in elementary school. And 1 occurred in pre-K.
That includes the higher education.
Oh, yeah, the higher education falls into a different one. I was just looking at the public schools, high school down.
You said 12 at higher education.
Yeah, there are 12 at 12 incidents in higher education with 60 individuals killed. In the school systems, in the lower schools, from high school on down, there were 27 with 57 killed. Tell me what I told you all about military and government properties. Good. 11 incidents, 24 killed. Private residences. Good. House of worship. And healthcare facilities. 4 and 10. Good.
Can you repeat those?
Yep.
Private residences, 7 with 32.
Houses of worship is 6 and 21. And healthcare was 4 and 10. I told you all there's a 3-step process to focus on understanding and stemming and stemming these shootings. What were the 3 steps that I gave you in the process? Systematic collection of data is number 1.
ID characteristics associated with higher rates of injury and death.
Good. Identify your characteristics associated with higher rates of injury or death. And number 3?
Enhance/develop protective factors to stem from it.
Good. Enhance/develop protective factors. Difficulty in identifying the risk. What is the big difficulty we have in identifying the risk? These mass shootings are going to be random. Right. Gun violence broadly is much more prevalent than an active shooter. True or false?
True.
Gun violence could be, one example of gun violence could be a drug deal gone wrong. True or false?
True.
One of the reasons it's so hard to get data on mass shootings is because
Most of the time, they end up committing suicide. You can't interview them.
that is one reason. What's the other about the numbers? What are we going to tell you about one of the reasons? Small data pool, good. One reason is they commit suicide. The reason I want you to know for the test is we have a very small data pool. Then we covered what we covered today. I want you all to know and be familiar with informational silos and the information that we covered today. All of that information we didn't cover, but about 5 or 6 things. We had a really good discussion, though, on a lot of these situations and symptoms. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
I actually got into a discussion with some of my colleagues last week on some of these statistics. One we talked about was that 40% of incidents fell under federal stipulations of mass killing, which was 3 or more people died.
Mhm.
And then we listed like the number 1 and 2. And the number 1 was the Aurora, Colorado shooting. We did some research because they called me out on it. And there were only 12 fatalities in the Aurora, Colorado shooting. Texas had 32.
They were talking about, with casualties, they were talking about wounded and,
That was my question.
yeah, they were talking about wounded and dead. But I do agree, from a death standpoint, Virginia Tech was much more violent, as far as the death toll. But the total number of people killed, the total number of people killed or injured in Aurora was larger than Tech. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look it up. No, it's not gonna be on your test.
Tomorrow, we're meeting in a a classroom over at Dickinson?
At my office, right there in the parking lot in front of the
I
Dickinson.
just wanted to.
By the way, anybody who wants to go with us tomorrow, meet over at my office, over in the parking lot right there at my office. We're going to meet at 8:30. By 8:45, we're gonna pull out. We'll be down there at the police department by 9. There is no delay tomorrow. If you wanna go to the firing range, there will not be a delay between going and touring the police department and all that stuff, and then going to the firing range. We don't have to wait until the kids are let out of school, they're gonna let us go on up and shoot. So once we get done at the police department, if that takes an hour or two, probably by 10 or 11, we're gonna go on up to the firing range and shoot. And you're welcome to stay up there as long as they have opportunity to stay there and let you shoot and do what you do, all right?
What were the restrictions on that too?
Just bring some eye protection and ear protection.
Like,
Any of that stuff. Beckley, you all are welcome too. I know it's a long ride, but you're welcome to do that. All right, any questions?
No, sir.
We're gonna take a test. We're gonna cover how media influences police work. Thursday, we'll cover media. The next week, we're gonna cover media both days.
We have a test in Monday's class next. We don't have a test.
In Monday's class.
In, 4 o'clock.
Last Thursday?
In fact, I've got the schedule. I'm gonna give you all the schedule, when we cover in the class. I've got the schedule for the rest of the year. 'Cause we're going out
I better get you
for
my schedule individually.
I'll tell you what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it.
Yeah, I've got
I think I'll make a
So,
call.
Well,
Alright.
I think
Cause there were some things that I even.
I appreciate you defending me, Mr. Lee.
from here to there.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
That should have been, I think
Now
I'm
we
crashing
went.
at this point.
Oh, gosh.
Y'all need anything before I leave? Everybody good? Mr.
We're
Kramer?
Yeah, I'm on the way to see Lily.
Are we gonna have to pay anything to get in there up there?
I'll deal with it.
I'll let you know. 3 hours.
Mr. Lee, have a good weekend.
What was it,
Maybe.
micro,
No,
or?
no, organic chemistry, forensic science, there's one other one. No. Forensic science or minor. I don't know, there's a forensic science class on this campus. Did you get yours? I'm going over to give me mine now. I've got victimology, death penalty. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take this one this semester, where I got those two, I'm gonna take those two in spring, now I only leave 2. Right. Yeah, I'm taking this.
Hey, this basic communication, it's a Monday only class?
Yes.
By the way, that's on the web, that's right, it's real nice.
Cause I only need 2 CJ classes next semester. It's fun. It's interesting. What are you taking this year?
You can go ahead and tear.
You've already took human anatomy, I've already took human anatomy 1.
That's
The
my
only thing we're gonna have
problem.
together is judicial process and victimology.
Oh.
Because although not needed, we don't need victimology for law enforcement, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it.
What? Is that human anatomy, are you taking one? Is that what you said?
Taking 1 now,
Oh, okay.
He's taking 1 this semester, and the following semester, he's gonna take 2.
because what screwed me is they didn't let me carry over my sciences and shit. Cause I had like 15 sciences when I got here.
I'm telling you,
Protection
I'm,
and ear protection.
Well, I wouldn't tell you Staples, because Staples is closed, but your local Walmart or, yeah, local Walmart.
that's about all you get around here is Walmart.
Because Walmart said, everybody.